Now, I listened to your tapes again the other day, and you mentioned that genetically some people need longer recovery time, correct?
Well, sure, obviously, just as there are those individuals who do not tolerate exposure to high-intensity sunlight stress as well as others, with Scandinavians and albinos at one extreme who tolerate literally almost no exposure to high-intensity sunlight stress. At the other extreme, you've got Negroes. And now here's an important part, TC. Perhaps more important, you've got everything in between. Now, it's a very interesting issue you bring up here. Maybe I can best explain it this way. Only if there was a God would he have the luxury of being able to look inside of your body, read your genetic material, your DNA, and be able to tell you with absolute certainty, thou shalt perform exactly 5 sets per workout every 76 hours, sir. Any more, any less will compromise your progress. Now, I've never pretended to be God. I can't guarantee those who call me or buy my books that I would start you out on the same baseline program that God Almighty would, although I'm not so sure it ain't the same program. All I can do as an informed and a highly experienced trainer is get an individual started out on a baseline program, I call it, one that works quite well for those with at least average recovery ability. Then they get to call me back every 2 weeks or so I can help them monitor their progress and deem whether or not it's satisfactory. If I deem it's not satisfactory, then I recommend certain modifications. Another way to look at it. Let's say, TC, that you were a sun tanning coach, if there were such a ridiculous thing, and you had 50 clients under your charge. Would you bring them all out into the intense August sunlight at the equator for 2 hours the first time?
No.
No. You might burn some of them to death. There is a wide range of variation with individuals in regard to sunlight stress tolerance. However, that does not contradict the fact that in every case the presence of the sun is required. The theory of sun tanning does not change. Nature does require the presence of the sun. Back to exercise. Just because there are those individuals who do not tolerate high-intensity exercise stress as well as others, does not contradict the fact that high-intensity training stress is an absolute requirement for inducing growth. The variation comes in with how much exercise stress any given individual can tolerate. As I made the point on the first tape, I've got some clients only doing 3 sets once a week. These might be viewed as the equivalent of albinos or Scandinavians with regards to sunlight stress tolerance. If you look at it that way, it's not so hard to understand. You'll be less incredulous. Now, most bodybuilders, knowing nothing about this, they'll run to their local newsstand every month, grab up a bunch of magazines, run home, riffle through the pages at random, pick out an arbitrary training program and stick to it slavishly for 2 years, and of course make little or no progress unless they're super genetic freaks taking a lot of steroids. And of course most of us are not that way. After 2 years, they'll either give up or just continue going to the gym, having lost their fire just as a habit or a social ritual. The science of exercise is not infinitely complex, as I said before, but it's not that simple either. There's another point here. Let's say that a listener calls me or buys my book and starts out on that baseline program, and it does work quite well from the beginning. It's also true, now this is very, very important. Very few bodybuilders understand this point, and it's of extreme importance. Let's say the program does work quite well from the beginning. It's also true that as each week passes, he continues to grow larger and stronger, lift progressively heavier weights. Of course, as the weights grow progressively greater, the demands on the body too grow progressively greater until finally, unless he does certain things to compensate for it, and this is the hard part, until finally he'll be so darn strong, the weights he'll be lifting will be so heavy, given the particular volume and frequency protocol he's on, the demands themselves will reach a critical point and they'll constitute overtraining. When that happens, you will experience what we all commonly refer to as a sticking point or a plateau. Now, there was a time up until recently, TC, when I thought that this was inevitable. In fact, I used to tell my phone consultation clients, okay, take this program, stay with it for 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks until it stops working. When that happens, call me back and we'll make some adjustments. Now I realize I made a grave mistake. I could have avoided that mistake if I would have kept in mind the very thing or phenomena I just explained, that as you grow stronger week to week, the demands grow greater. If you don't compensate for those increasing demands by doing certain things, you will inevitably reach a sticking point. Keep that in mind, that as you're getting stronger week to week, the demands are growing greater. And compensate for it by periodically inserting extra rest days, eliminating certain exercises, and there are other things. I don't want to go into all this and through that. I'm just whetting their appetite so they call me for a phone consultation.
Right.
You don't have to reach a sticking point. When you're in possession of a valid theory and you're making the proper application, you should start making progress immediately from the time you start training and uninterrupted, continuously until you reach the upper limits of your physical potential. Now, several years ago, Arthur Jones made the statement that from the time an individual starts training, he should be able to reach the upper limits of his muscular potential in 2 years, and now I realize he was grossly wrong. You should be able to reach the upper limits of your potential in 6 to we have called Western science.
Mm-hmm.
I pointed this out to several people, and they became incredulous immediately. And I say, hold on a second. If you were to find yourself in the jungle tomorrow and you happened upon a voodoo witch doctor, he would probably have about a 0% success rate with his patients. Then all of a sudden you introduce to him these miracles called antibiotics, aspirin, sterile bandages. His success rate literally skyrockets off the charts. He thinks you're either God or the devil. We have this wonderful thing in Western civilization called theoretical knowledge. The purpose of a theory, again, is to serve as a guideline for successful human action. If any of the listeners are doubtful that it's possible to reach the upper limits of your muscular potential in 1 year or less, I'll give you another analogy. If NASA, the Space Administration, can send a man to the moon and bring him back safely every time, and they have, don't tell me we can't succeed with each and every one of our missions to the gym here on Earth in a spectacular fashion as well.
Okay. All right.
Sending a man to the moon requires the application of theoretical knowledge from physics, astronomy, electronics, engineering, medicine, biology. Building muscles should be a cakewalk compared to a moonwalk.
Okay.
Don't tell me we can't succeed with every one of our missions to the gym here on Earth if they can send a man to the moon and bring him back safely each time.